Welcome back to the channel, guys. Today we're going to show you how to make some split tail soft plastics where you have a different tail color than the body. We're going to go over 3 different techniques on how you can achieve this. Hopefully this helps you guys out. Let's get into it. Alright, so the first technique we're going to use is actually one of the core shot molds. We got our rods all oiled up and inside the mold. We're just going to close that up. We got our plastic cooking in the microwave and we're going to start building this first color. Alright, for this first color, we're just going to use black, and then we're going to add some of the 0.04 blue flake. We're going to make this color pretty thick because we're not going for the core shot effect on this, we're just doing the split tail. So we're going to add a little more pigment than we normally would. Got our black all stirred in, and this is the navy hex cut flake. If I can get this cup open. There we go. We're going to use an 1/8 teaspoon of this. Get that all mixed in. I think I'm going to add a little bit more blue flake. I'm going to add another 1/8 of a teaspoon, so we're going to be at a 1/4 teaspoon total. There we go. So this is going to be our first body color on this core shot mold. So we're going to get this up to temperature. We're going to inject the first run, and then I'll show you what we're going to do. All right, plastic is hot. We're going to inject this first run real quick. Purge the air out of the injector. Alright, we'll meet you back when that cools off and I'll show you the next step. Alright, so the plastic's cooled off. What we're going to do on these is we're going to take these out. So if you remember in the other core shot video, we oil those rods so that you can grab your bait and just slide them right off the rods. So we're going to do the same thing. We're going to get all these slid off of the rods. And then what we're going to do is cut the tails off. And I'll explain why we do that in just a second. Alright, so we got all of our shells off, and what we're going to do is you can see right here at the very end of where the ribbed body stops, and then you have this little like butt portion. We're going to take our scissors and we're just going to cut all of them off right there, and then you're going to take this little shell and lay them right back into the mold. So we're going to do that to the rest of them, get them all back in the mold, and then we'll mix up our tail color. So as you can see, we got all the tails cut off, we got our shells laying back into the mold. We're just going to get all this closed back up. Again, make sure the mold sits nice and flush, everything's closed, and you're not pinching any of those shells in the mold. Alright, and for our tail color, we're just going to use a blue, and then we're going to add some blue flake. Just another good variation of black and blue. Get this all stirred up real good. So in the shell color, we used a navy blue. In this one, we're actually going to use the royal blue. And I'm going to add an 1/8 teaspoon of the smaller, the 0.015. And then an 1/8 teaspoon of the medium size, the 0.040. I like the way the royal blue looks inside of the blue color. It's a little bit brighter than the navy, and I think it just gives it a really good... This is basically sapphire blue. It's a really nice, shiny blue flake in this blue color. And there we have that. We're going to get all this mixed in real good. We'll make sure it's up to temperature, and then we're going to inject. Remember, in the other core shot video, I did say when you inject through the core of these baits, you do want to inject a little hotter. So the shell that we injected, the black color, was around like 310 degrees. We're going to inject this one around 340. You do want to inject a little bit hotter just to make sure that it goes all the way through the bait and the tails will fill in. Alright, plastic's good. We are ready to inject. We're going to inject this a little bit faster than the shell color also, just because you want to make sure that everything fills in real nice and even. All right, our blue is cooled off. I'm gonna open this up and take a look. And there you have it. That is one way to make the split tail version. If you don't have a core shot mold, I'll show you on the next one a way to get this same effect. You just have to inject the tail color first, cut off your tail, and then inject your body color. With doing this with the core shot mold, your tail color, since it is actually running through the body, your connection between your tail and your body is going to be a little bit stronger. But yeah, super cool way to make these. This is the first way, and now we're going to move on to the next one. Alright, for our second tail color, we're going to make a chartreuse tail, which is probably one of the most common split tail colors that you're going to see. We're going to put a decent amount of that in there. And chartreuse by itself is a pretty translucent color, kind of see-through. So what I like to do when I'm making these is I'll add just a little bit of gold pearl powder. We're going to be using, see if you can see that, it's a 1/32 teaspoon, so it's not very much at all. We're going to add just that little bit. It just helps thicken up the chartreuse a little bit without affecting the actual color too much. And you can see how this is kind of clumping up. You do have to stir the powder a lot to get it to mix in really well. So I'm going to keep stirring this. I'm not going to let you make you guys watch the whole thing, but I'm going to stir it all in. And once it's ready, we'll inject this mold. And we are ready to inject this chartreuse. We got it back up to temperature. Got all that gold pearl powder mixed in. Alright, so we're going to get this open. This is the 5-inch jerkbait mold. This is a bait that is very commonly used. What a lot of guys will do is buy like a green pumpkin jerkbait, and then they'll dip the tail of it in the spike it dip. So one thing I want to make sure I emphasize is when you're doing this technique, so what we injected what's going to be the tail color first. And then we're going to take our scissors and we're going to cut the tail off and then inject the body color. The one thing that I always try to keep in mind, so if you see these lines on the molds, that's your air vent. So if you were to cut this tail right here in the middle of these two air vents, you do run the risk of this last little bit of the tail filling in because your air is going to get trapped and it doesn't have a way to escape. So what I like to do on this mold is you pick whatever vent you want, which is however long your tail is going to be. For me, the second vent right here, I think is the perfect length. I'm going to cut those tails right in line with that air vent so that when I go to inject my body color, the plastic can go all the way through, the air can escape, and I'll get a good connection between the tail and the body. So the way I do this is I just leave the baits in the mold, and I'll pick it up just enough to slide my scissors in line with that air vent. I'll cut it off, and then I'll just go all the way across the mold doing the same thing. That's going to do a couple different things. Like I just said, it's going to allow your air to vent properly still. And you're going to get a good bond, and it's another way to give a pretty consistent result as far as the length of your tails so that everything kind of matches. Once you get all your tails cut, you can just pull the bodies off. With these tails in particular, what you can do to prevent from pinching the tails, because these don't lay real easy into the mold, is if you wanted to take them out, put a little bit of worm oil on your hands, oil those tails up. It's going to help them slide back into the mold the way they're supposed to be. So we got those tails cut. We're going to put the mold back together, mix up our body color, and then we'll inject this one. Alright, so next up is our body color. We're going to use this cutthroat trout, which I think you guys have seen on the channel once before. I think it's going to complement that chartreuse tail really well. So we're going to add some of that. You can kind of see as I'm mixing, it has that kind of like goldish copper effect, the highlight effect. That gold highlight or the gold pearl powder that we added to the chartreuse, the two of those together are going to complement each other really well. And I think it's going to be a really good color. I'm actually going to add about 2 drops of black because I just want to darken it just a little. Oh, let's go 3. But I don't want it to get too thick. So I'm just going to add a few drops of black real quick. And then for flake on this one, grab my scoops. We're going to go with some medium, the .040 black. Add some of that. And then we're going to add some .015 gold. Get all that black off of there first. And add some of this gold. Get this all mixed in and see what we're looking at. Yeah, I think that's going to be really good with that chartreuse tail. So I'm going to get this all mixed up, get it back up to temperature, and then we'll inject this mold. Alright, got our chartreuse tails in the mold. Got our plastic back up. We're going to, again, shoot this a little bit warmer, around 340, just because you want the plastic a little bit hotter so when it meets up with the tail, you get a nice, secure bond. If you inject too cold, you do run the risk of the tails coming off fairly easy. We get this injected, that feels good. We're going to top off our mold, and then we'll check it out when it's done. Alright, let's check these out. I have a really good feeling about these. I haven't made this exact color before, but I have a feeling it's going to be pretty good. Oh yeah, I like that one a lot. So that cutthroat trout color kind of has that highlight in it, and then with that gold flake matching up with that tail. I thought when I started to make this video that black and blue color was going to be my favorite, but I think this one definitely tops that. But yeah, like I was saying, what a lot of guys will do is they'll buy just like a green pumpkin jerkbait and spike it makes that like dipping dye. And they'll take it and they'll dip the tails down into the dye to kind of get this similar effect. But with doing this, the tail, the chartreuse on the tail is just a pure chartreuse on this, whereas the dye, you're just putting chartreuse over whatever color you have, so it's not quite as bright as these. But I think these are going to be really, really good. Coming up this spring, this is definitely going to get thrown a lot. I like those a lot. But yeah, we'll compare all the end. We got one more way to go, or one more technique to use, which I think is probably one of the best ones. We'll get these molds out and I'll show you what they are. Alright, for this last tail color, we're just going to use some straight red. Pour a little of that in there. Just get us a nice bright red. And then we're just going to add a little bit of the medium-sized black flake, the .040 again. And we're not going to add very much because this is a small amount of plastic. Because this last technique, we're going to be using a tail mold. And the tails, you don't need a whole lot of plastic to fill the mold. But yep, I'm liking the way that looks. Just a nice bright red with black flake. So we're going to get all this ready. We're going to inject this tail mold and then I'll show you how this works. Alright, plastic is hot. Mold is ready. Purge the air out of this real quick. If you guys notice any like bubbles in some of the baits that I've made today, the O-ring on my injector is starting to go bad, and I just haven't taken it out and replaced it. But for the purpose of the video, it'll still get by. Alright, so this mold is cooled off, and I'll show you how these tail molds work. Get these out. So as you can see, the tail molds literally just inject the tail. And I'm going to try to get this up here so you can see it. So you can see up here towards the top, there's those little rectangle cutouts. What that does is when you lay this back into your normal mold and inject, the body color will actually fill that in and go through the tail. So your body color going through the tail gives you a lot stronger bond. Because a lot of times if you're fishing and fish just come up and bite the tails, especially if you're doing split tails like this and you have a bright colored tail on a just like a regular colored body, they'll come up and bite the tail. If you just cut it like what we did on the jerk baits, you do run the risk of those tails popping off. With these tail molds like this, and having those little cutouts for the body to fill in, you have a lot stronger bond, and the chances of the tails getting ripped off are a lot less. It can still happen, but like I said, the chances of it staying together are a lot higher. So we're going to get these into our other molds, and we'll mix up the body color for those. That is by far the most time-consuming part of doing split tails, is after you shoot the tail mold, getting all the tails laid back into the mold. I did put a couple drops of worm oil on all the tails, just kind of rub them all together, and it helps lay the tails back into the mold. The worm oil also assists when you go to put the top half of the mold back on. If the tails aren't perfectly in the cavity, that worm oil will allow them to slide into place as you put the molds back together. Alright, for this last color, this is actually a new color to me. It's MF's Black Watermelon. I haven't used it before, so we're going to find out here what this one looks like. I'm hoping it's just kind of a darker watermelon color. But let's see what we got. Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like. So you can see on the stir, it's still a pretty bright green, and then in the cup it looks pretty dark. That's still pretty see-through. We're going to add some more of that. Not going to quite so see-through. Yeah, so that's basically just a really, really dark watermelon color. I think we're going to keep it right there. And then we're going to add some medium black flake, 0.040. This is one of the most commonly used flakes. And then to go with those red tails, we're going to add a little bit of the small 0.015 red flake, just to kind of accent it and get the colors kind of blend in together. I think that'll look pretty good. So that's kind of where we're at. I think I might add just a little bit more of the black flake. I think we're good on the red, but I want a little bit more black. I actually like this color a lot. Like I said, this is the first time I've used it. Yeah, that's what I want. So I'm going to get all this stirred in real good. I'll get it up to temperature, and then we'll inject these worms and see how they look. All right, here we go with this one. These are the 10-inch Angling AI ribbon tail molds. Hopefully I have enough plastic to inject both of these. All right. It feels pretty good. Let's go to the second one. Yeah, I think we had enough. Yeah, it feels good. All right, I'm pretty excited about this black watermelon color. I think it's going to look pretty good. We'll let these cool off, and then we'll open them up and check it out. All right, our green is cooled off. Let's get these open and see what they look like. Oh yeah, that black watermelon color might be my new favorite way to make watermelon red. That's a really, really cool color, because it's still nice and dark, but it's not super like opaque. You can still kind of see through it really nicely. Definitely like that color. I'm glad I picked that one up. I do have a bunch of new colors. We will go over a lot of those probably in the next video or so. Alright guys, there you have it. That is 3 different ways to make these split tail baits. We've got the core shot method, where you can inject your shell color, pull that core shot rod out, cut the tail off, inject it, and then you get it that way. We have the jerk baits, where you just cut the tail off. Again, make sure you're cutting near one of those air vents so you're not trapping air and your plastic can come all the way through. And then the tail mold. So the tail mold and the core shot molds are definitely the stronger bond of the 3 options. With the core shot, you have that tail color going all the way through the body, so it's connected all the way through. And then the tail mold, like we said, we have that little square cutout where the body color actually goes through the tail. All 3 of these are really good options. They all work really well. Like I said, my preferred method is probably with the tail mold. The other thing about the tail mold is you use a lot less plastic. So if you just want to make a tail color, you don't have to mix up a full cup of plastic. You can mix up just a tiny amount, inject your tails, and then run everything else. Whereas, like on these jerk baits, you have to inject the entire mold to be able to cut those tails off, put it back in the mold, and then go. Don't forget, like, you can, the bodies of these, when you cut the tails off, you can remelt all those bodies down and make whatever else you want. But yeah, just 3 really cool ways to make these split tail colors. Which one do you guys like best? Which one's your favorite out of the 3? I originally, when I started this video, thought these black and blue were going to be my favorite, but I don't know. I'm pretty torn between these two. These 2 colors are really good. I really, really like that black watermelon color. As you guys can see, it's still really see-through and translucent, but it's still nice and dark. Really cool color. I'm really excited about that one. And then these jerkbaits, that gold flake and that cutthroat trout color, just kind of complement and accent that chartreuse tail really, really well. Really happy with all 3 of these. Let me know which ones you guys like the best, which one's your favorite, what you'd like to see next. Again, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe, share the video with your friends, and we'll see you next time.